For 6 months, I worked alongside Queen Thesara, restoring her dying world, planting seeds in toxic marshes, coaxing life from dead soil, watching green return to barren fields, and I fell for her somewhere between the first sprout and the first time she laughed at a returning river, never knowing what we were really building. Kale Rivers stood on the edge of Viridian Prime's northern marshlands, staring into the toxic muck that once held vibrant life. The soil was poisoned, rivers deadened by industrial runoff, ecosystems in perilous collapse. It was here he had to begin his work, cultivating hope from despair and life from desolation. "Dr. Rivers," a clear voice called out behind him, cutting through his silent contemplation. He had started. He turned around to find Queen Thesara standing with an array of tools in her hands: gloves, tongs, seeds wrapped carefully in cloth. She wore practical clothes and had tied back her silver hair in preparation for the work ahead. "I was expecting you'd give me a team," Kale said, approaching her cautiously. "I wasn't planning on working alone." Thesara smiled gently, handing him a bag of recovery seeds. "This is my world. I will not watch from a palace while someone else saves it." She knelt down beside the marshes and began to clear out a small patch with meticulous care. Kale joined her immediately, testing soil samples in his portable lab and analyzing water content. The work was grueling. They would often find themselves knee-deep in toxic mud for hours at a time. Thesara never complained, matching him hour for hour without pause or rest. Her dedication was infectious, and Kale began to admire her not just as the queen, but also as his partner. One day during month 2, while planting seeds together amidst an oppressive heat wave, their hands brushed accidentally against each other's gloves. "Sorry," Thesara murmured softly, eyes meeting his momentarily before turning back towards the marshland. "Together we give life." Kale nodded mechanically, but her words echoed in his mind long after she had planted another seed and moved on to the next patch of muck. He assumed it was a local expression, something that meant little more than teamwork or companionship. First sprouts appeared during month 3. Small green shoots pushing through dead soil gave Kale chills down his spine. Thesara, however, broke into silent tears at this miraculous sight. She wiped them away hastily and smiled softly when she noticed him watching her closely. Later that evening, Queen Thesara asked if he would like to join her for a meal. It was tradition in Viridian culture, she explained. Eating food grown from soil you restored with your own hands was meant to signify hope and gratitude towards the planet's resurgence. Kale agreed without hesitation. They dined under the stars that night on what tasted like pure optimism. As month 4 approached, they moved into the dead forests. Planting trees, there would take decades, if not centuries, for them to mature properly, but every seed planted was a promise of tomorrow's rebirth. One day, while tending to saplings in one such forest clearing, Thesara turned to him with an unusual question. "Will you return here sometime to see these grow?" she asked quietly, her eyes flickering nervously from side to side, as though afraid he might decline outright. Kale thought about it for a moment. There was no contract clause specifically stating when his work ended or began regarding future visits. "I could," he replied slowly but truthfully. Her smile widened at this admission. "Good," she whispered, her eyes glistening again with unshed tears of gratitude mixed now perhaps even relief. By month 5, the river ecosystem had started stabilizing. Fish and birds returned once more thanks to their combined efforts, restoring water purity levels crucial for marine life cycles back into balance. Thesara laughed out loud in sheer joy one sunny afternoon when she saw this happen before her eyes, a sound Kale had never heard from her until now. When she hugged him impulsively, he found himself hugging right back, and it felt completely natural to do so, yet neither mentioned the moment afterwards or made any references about what might have happened if their roles were different in that instant. 6 months of painstaking work brought them closer every day, yet unbeknownst even by Kale themselves was how close they had truly grown beyond professional partnership. Thesara had been counting each passing day as sacred vows, planting life alongside her human counterpart, expecting him to leave soon, but never quite prepared for the thought that maybe he wouldn't. As their work neared completion, and the planet showed clear signs of recovery from its dying state, Cale found himself wondering aloud if she felt this same unspoken connection through shared labor as well. Little did he know how much the celebration was a riot of colors and sounds, a stark contrast to the muted tones of Viridian Prime's poisoned marshes and deadened forests where Cale had spent 6 months restoring life. The festival of cultivation honored their efforts, but felt surreal to him, too much attention for what he saw as simply doing his job. The recovered lands were on full display, a testament to their hard work. Vast fields of green dotted with budding flowers and crops replaced the barren wastelands that had greeted them 6 months ago. Cale walked alongside Queen Thessara, feeling both proud and uneasy under the eyes of thousands who gathered in this grand celebration. "Come," Thessara said softly when they reached a large open area where the festival was held, her hand finding his almost by reflex. "This is for you." She didn't need to explain further. He felt it all read, a significance that went beyond simple gratitude or appreciation. Traditional songs filled the air as dancers from various parts of Viridian performed graceful routines, their movements fluid and elegant like water flowing over stones. Cale watched in wonder, his gaze occasionally drifting back towards Thessara, who stood beside him, a vision of elegance marred only slightly by her mud-streaked attire. The food was served next, plates heaped with fresh vegetables from the restored fields, fruits that had ripened thanks to their efforts, and bread baked using clean water drawn from newly revitalized springs. The tastes were vibrant, life itself encapsulated in every bite, and Cale found himself smiling broadly as Thessara guided him through each dish. As evening fell, and the sky painted hues of orange and pink, a hush descended over the crowd. Queen Thessara stepped forward onto an elevated platform where all eyes turned toward her with anticipation. For 6 months, she began in clear tones that carried across even without amplification, "I have worked beside someone who has shown us what it means to truly care for our world." Thessara paused, letting those words settle before continuing. "Cale Rivers is not just a specialist, he's my partner. In the marshes we sweated and struggled together. We faced countless challenges head on in the forests and fields." She took Cale's hand, gently but firmly, her fingers intertwining with his, as if to underscore every point she made about their shared journey. Cale felt both humbled by this public acknowledgement and bewildered. His gaze flicked nervously around him. He had never expected such recognition, or even imagined what cultivating life could mean beyond environmental restoration for the planet they were healing together. "Every seed we planted," Thessara continued, her voice laced with a deeper meaning now that made Cale's heart race, "was more than just hope. It was also love." He looked at her, then really saw her violet eyes, shimmering in the fading light of day, silver hair tied back from her face despite having been worn thin during months of labor side by side with him. She had worked tirelessly alongside herself without ever faltering once, even as they faced daunting challenges. "Every sprout," she went on softly but clearly now for everyone to hear, "every plant that grew, it was all a promise." Cale's breath caught in his throat. At this point, he didn't understand exactly what Thessara meant, yet could sense its weight hanging heavily between them like an unspoken truth. "In Viridian culture," she said then, turning fully towards him and squeezing his hands tightly, "working together to restore life is considered the most sacred form of marriage." Cale felt as though time had stopped altogether in that moment. Marriage, to her? He must have heard wrong or misinterpreted everything about their bond during these past months. Thessara continued gently to cultivate for 6 months side by side. Thighs forms a union so deep, no words are needed to cement it. Tears glistened at the corners of Thessara's eyes, but she didn't let them fall as yet. Instead, she stepped closer still until they were nearly touching. "Every day we worked," she whispered now only for him alone amidst all those watching them closely too. We married each other, without knowing it. Cale shook his head slowly, in disbelief, his mind racing even as he tried to comprehend the enormity of her words, and the emotion behind them. It felt like a dream. "Did you plan this?" he asked finally, voice barely above a whisper, but carrying none the less through silence, now holding everything captive. Thisara smiled sadly, but warmly. "All at once, no," she admitted quietly, squeezing his hands again before letting go reluctantly to cup either side of Cale's face tenderly in her palms instead. "I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid you might stop if you knew." The crowd watched this exchange intently. Some murmured amongst themselves, while the celebration continued in a hushed silence as Cale stood there, stunned by Thisara's revelation. Minister Vreck stepped forward abruptly, his face contorted with displeasure and frustration. "This bond is not valid," he declared sharply to both Queen Thisara and Dr. Rivers. He did not know what the cultivation bond entailed. Thisara turned towards him calmly, her violet eyes hardening as she responded coldly. "Cultivation bond does not require knowledge. It requires work, dedication, shared growth." She gestured at their restored lands beyond them, now dotted with fresh greenery and budding flowers. "He gave more than any formal suitor ever offered." Rex's lips tightened into a thin line as he persisted, "But he is human. This will cause political crisis for Viridian." Cale stepped forward firmly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Since 6 months getting to know your queen, working beside her, watching her care about every seedling like it was her child." His gaze met Rex's squarely as he continued, "If Viridian marriage is about dedication and shared work, then I am more married to her than any political arrangement could make me." Thisara took Cale's hand in hers, squeezing gently. She lifted their clasped hands before the crowd for all to see. "The bond is valid," she said firmly, turning back towards Minister Vrex, who looked taken aback by this sudden show of unity from both human and queen. "The marriage stands." She addressed her people then. "Any who challenge this challenge me." Silence reigned over the assembly, as none stepped forward to contest. Even so, Cale could see shadows flitting across several faces out mixed with resignation. Vrex retreated somewhat, his expression one of deep contemplation and potential strategy being formed behind those eyes. But for now, it was done. That night found Thisara and Cale alone at last in their chambers high above the restored lands they had nurtured back to life. The evening breeze brought the sweet scent of blooming flowers wafting through open windows as silence settled between them once more. "You could have told me on month 1, Cale murmured softly, his hand brushing against Thisara's cheek tenderly. "I was already falling for you by then." She smiled wryly and shook her head slightly. "I know." Her eyes were full of warmth, yet also a touch of regret that made him want to hold her closer still. She admitted quietly, "I watched you watch me when you thought I wasn't looking." Cale pulled back just enough so he could look into those violet depths now soft with understanding and affection. "You knew?" She nodded, leaning in close until their foreheads touched gently. Her silver hair fell like a curtain around them as she spoke softly. "I am a queen. I notice everything." She kissed him tangentially, at first, but deepening almost instantly into something more than just an acknowledgement of love. "I just wanted to be sure you loved the work as much as me," Thisara said against his lips, her hand moving up to cradle the back of his neck. Cale considered it for a moment before answering. "The work is how I show my care, restoring things, caring for them." His gaze softened further at this realization, which she clearly saw on his face too now. He touched Thisara's cheek, tracing lines along her jawline with gentle fingertips. "You aren't separate from it, though," he said softly but firmly, gazing into those eyes that mirrored back everything they had shared together over these past months. "You are part of this." She smiled thankfully and beautifully, drew him closer once more for another kiss. "Then, let us cultivate something else together tonight." She tugged lightly at his hand, leading them towards the bed where they would continue their partnership in ways that transcended simple earth-bound work, but still rooted deeply within it too. Cale followed willingly. "I I always follow you. 6 months of seeds, a lifetime of growth. Some partnerships became marriages indeed, and theirs had grown beyond mere restoration to encompass far more than either could have imagined at the start. Their bond now firmly established, they embraced their shared future together amidst renewed life across Viridian Prime. Years passed on Viridian Prime, and under Kale River's guidance and Thisara's leadership, their planet continued to flourish. The once dying world was transformed into a lush oasis where life thrived in vibrant abundance. Fields that had been barren and toxic marshes that had emitted poisonous gases were now filled with the sounds of water flowing through clean streams and birds chirping from newly planted trees. Kale's dedication never waned, and neither did Thisara's love for him. Together, they expanded their projects beyond what was initially conceived to teach others about sustainable cultivation practices. Their methods became a beacon for other planets facing similar environmental crises who sought guidance and inspiration in the renaissance of Viridian Prime. Their bond deepened with each passing day, and before long, children began to fill their life together. The eldest among them, little Lyra, had inherited her mother's silver hair and her father's steadfast resolve. She was raised knowing nothing but lush fields, verdant forests, and the joy of planting seeds side by side. One afternoon, during a break from work in their vast gardens, Kale found himself sitting with young Lyra under an old oak tree that he had planted not long after arriving on Viridian Prime. The child's fingers were stained green from pulling out weeds as they prepared another section for new seedlings. "How did you and Mother get married?" Lyra asked suddenly, her eyes wide with curiosity as she looked up at Kale. Kale exchanged a glance with Thisara, who stood nearby holding the youngest of their 3 children. Both smiled warmly before he turned back to his daughter. "I was hired to fix your mother's planet," Kale explained patiently, running his hand through Lyra's soft hair gently. "She did not tell me that working together was a wedding." Lyra frowned slightly at this revelation, her small brow furrowing as she thought deeply about it. She looked up again and said, "That does not seem fair." Thisara laughed softly from where she stood with the infant in one arm, and used her free hand to gesture towards Kale fondly. "It wasn't," Thisara admitted with a grin, stepping closer so that Lyra could see her better. "Your father was very confused at the celebration." She paused for effect before continuing. "He did not expect it." Kale added teasingly, "But I already loved your mother deeply long before any official ceremony or planting seeds became involved." He winked playfully in Thisara's direction, which only made her chuckle. Lyra considered this new information thoughtfully. "So if I help someone plant things for 6 months, will that be how we get married?" she asked eagerly, eyes sparkling with the idea of following in their footsteps someday. Thisara quickly clarified, "Not until you are much older and ready to take on such responsibilities. And just like your father wanted it, even though he didn't know what he was doing, it has to come from a place of love." The child nodded seriously, absorbing this lesson as she would any other taught by her parents. She then ran off happily to resume playing amidst the budding plants. Kale watched his daughter go with a sense of warmth and pride before turning back towards Thisara, who had approached him again now that their youngest was safely napping in one of the nearby greenhouses. "We should probably explain Viridian customs properly sometime," Kale mused aloud, looking up at her affectionately. "Otherwise someone might accidentally get married." Thisara leaned against his shoulder with a playful smirk on her lips. "Where would be the fun in that?" Kale laughed heartily and ruffled Thisara's hair gently. "You are terrible." She grinned back at him mischievously. He kissed her forehead tenderly, then, adding as an afterthought, "But it worked out perfectly for me," she corrected quickly with a mock sternness in her voice. "It was a cultivation bond." Kale chuckled and looked out across the restored lands before them, now teeming with life and color thanks to years of shared work and care. It had all started from knee-deep mud, where 2 strangers began planting seeds together, unknowingly pledging their lives. "And it worked out perfectly," he agreed softly, turning back towards Thisara, who stood beside him wrapped in the beauty they created side by side. The garden they built became a world. The world turned into a home for countless beings now living healthy and prosperous lives, thanks to Kale's agricultural expertise combined with Thesara's wisdom and leadership. Green everywhere, life flourishing amidst what once was despair, all grown from shared dedication, hard work, and sometimes even accidental vows made without words. Best everything, he concluded quietly but firmly, as they watched the sunset over their thriving lands. Toj, Theron hand in